So, comment what and how. Well, comment what? Everything. There's not one piece of code in your application that shouldn't be commented, and you have to do that all the time. Comment in English. Please don't start writing things that are understandable only by you in the next 5 minutes. Write your command in plain good English, or in French in my case, of course, if I'm writing a French software, but at least in an understandable and translatable language. Comment what? Well, you have to comment what you want to do. That's what you have to write. An example. Loop is not a comment. Everybody can see that you have after that a while, a for, or a loop instruction. There's no problem there. So loop by itself, it's not good. Now if you write loop on stored company to create contacts, that is a comment. Because, okay, here is the beginning of your loop. You're looping on what? On the company that was stored previously. And you're doing that for what? What do you want to do? You want to create a contact. So that is giving you the meaningful information about what you are trying to achieve. So if you use my method of commenting by writing your algorithm beforehand in your code placed directly as commands, you already know what to comment and how, because you're writing your algorithm and you need, when you read your algorithm, to be able to know what to do. So if you do that way, you're not going to ask yourself, okay, what should I write here and there? No, you're going to start writing the story here of what your code is supposed to do. And once you have the story, you just write it in detail. And that is working really very, very well. Try it. And if you're not used to it, try it again and again. And you will see that after a few days or a few weeks of using that method, you're going to realize that you don't know how you could live without doing it before. Let's talk about variable naming conventions. There are many conventions out there, and you can have a look, by example, in Wikipedia. If you check variable naming conventions, you'll find lots of information, and you can choose whatever you want. Just choose one and stick to it. It's extremely important when you are working with other people to use the same naming convention, because it helps make the code more readable, it helps understand what the other is doing easily. So it's really not that important which one you choose, but choose one that you find helpful, that really gives you some advantage, and don't change from there. Really be always consistent in your naming. By example, I'm using a kind of Hungarian notation. Why is it called that is not really important, but if you're interested in the story, you can check on Wikipedia too, or we'll talk about that later. But what is the Hungarian notation? It's first using the PCSoft charter, which means that it starts by a prefix, which typically in Hungarian notation is a lowercase prefix that gives you the type of the variable. And then you have the name all by itself with a modifier afterwards in camel case notation. Camel case means that each word in your variable name is uppercase and everything else is lowercase. That allows you to easily see that it's name modifier, it's this and that. The example is S company name. When you see this kind of variable in my code, you know that it's a string and it's the name of a company, so you know how to deal with it. There are many different ways of doing that. By example, you could have name dash modifier or name underscore modifier. But in some languages this kind of thing can create problem. By example, in JavaScript, underscore is not going to be allowed. So the notation I'm using is kind of working everywhere, and even when I ask WebDev not to replace my variable name by A1, A2, A3 in order to gain space in the page, well, the notation I'm using is working in JavaScript. It wouldn't if I was using underscore. And personally, I prefer that notation. I find it more readable. Now, compared to the kind of thing that we've all seen at one point or another, I'm sure, Y, J, K are integer. Great. When you see in your code Y, J, or K, it's going to be very easy to know what's going on. H is time, D is date. Much better now. H, it's an hour, so okay, it's a time, and D, well, it's a date. Actually, we'll have D1, D2, D3, D274, and that's coming directly from the old time of Apple Basic, when you had only one letter and one number to make a variable. Just forget that and do something with a name that is longer than that. And it's not taking more time to type it, because you have name completion in the WinDev editor, so it's really not a problem, and you can read your code. It's really much easier. Oh, that one is also really good. CY name is string. Okay, is that company name? Is that country name? Is that city name? Or something else altogether? This kind of name is misgiving on so many levels. You don't know what it is, but it looks like it could be. At least if you're doing H is time, you just have H in your code and that's it. You're not thinking it can be this or that. You have to go see if there's a command somewhere. With name, well, you think it should be this. Well, too bad, it was something else, and you just put the wrong value in your database. That's what happened. Of course, all that is a convention, and there are many out there, and the debate between people saying that this convention is good, that convention is bad, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, is extremely heated. I'm not in any kind of religious thinking, so you can use the convention you want, I don't care. I'm just saying that you should get one and stick to it. That's what is important for me. When I have to work with somebody on a project, always asking what are your convention, variable naming, procedure naming, and I'm doing with it because it's their code. They are going to deal with that. If they don't have anything, well, I use mine, and well, sometimes they see that okay, oh, it's clear, we can use that. So really think about it, and remember that it's very easy in WinDev to change the name of a variable. If you just rename it in the declaration, it will automatically propose for you to rename all the places where this variable was used in the scope of that object. So you just change that, you click on the OK, change all for me, and you're done. So even on an existing project, you can rename your variable and add really good development strategy to an existing project. Now, as I told you, there are many discussions about what is good, what is not good out there. And well, in many cases you have people who are really sure that they have the absolute truth. They generally forget that what is true in one language is not always true in the other, and that the advantage that you have here or there is not always absolute. So let's have a look at the pros and cons, as I could find some of them on Wikipedia by example. Sorry. So the advantages first. The variable type can be seen from its name. S company name is a string. That's clear. It has this. So we already talked about this prefix thing and how it can help you debug your code more easily. Then this convention naming leads to more consistent variable name, and deciding on a variable name can be a very mechanical and quick process. If it's the name of a company and a string, well, it's S company name. There's nothing to think about. It's going to be S company name for me, S company name for you, and S company name for the 5 developers that are working for you. So this way, really, there's nothing to think about. You're not going to check if SCN is a company name or SC is the company name or whatever else. You have something that is consistent. If you have a wrong type somewhere, an appropriate typecasting, an operation using incompatible types that, like you saw in the example that I showed you before, it can easily be detected when you are reading the code. So you can see, obviously, if you are subtracting 2 strings, you're doing something strange. And of course, the variable name itself, not only the type, but the variable name guards against using it in an improper way. By example, if you're doing something like window height equal window.getWidth in some language, okay, you're putting the width of something in a variable that is made to take the height. Is that really what you want to do? Could be if you are rotating the window, but otherwise it's probably an error. So if you have this kind of information in your variable name, you're much better able to code your process correctly. Let's talk about the disadvantages found on Wikipedia again. I was hard-pressed to find any disadvantage to that system because I'm really convinced that it's a really good one. So I went on Wikipedia and I found some people who say things against the system, and I'm going to list a few of them, not all of them, because some of them obviously did not apply at all to our problem. But let's find out what are the principal cons officially against that strategy, and I'll try to tell you why I do not agree with these cons. It's redundant with the type checking made by the compiler. What does that mean? It means that according to these people, it doesn't matter if in your code you're doing integer equal string minus string, because the compiler will tell you that when you are compiling. Well, okay, but personally I would prefer to know immediately when I'm coding that I'm making a mistake and not wait for the compiling time, which can be well, much later, of course. Second point is that well, it's not always true. In the case that I showed you in the example, it was true because we are trying to do a subtraction of 2 strings. Well, there's no such thing as the subtraction of 2 strings in WinDev, in W language. But there is such a thing as addition of 2 strings. And if you do string A plus string B, it is a valid operation in W language. You are concatenating the 2 strings. And if the 2 strings contain the first one 1, 2, 3 and the second 2, 3, 4, then the resulting string contains a numeric represented as a string, and if you do integer equal that string, the WinDev compiler is going to automatically change the type for you, and there will be absolutely no error from the compiler. Does that mean that you wanted to add the 2 string representation and then transform that in an integer, or that you wanted the value that is in each variable to be added to the other one and then sent to the integer? Well, that's typically a bug that you will not get if you don't have the type in the variable name. So of course some compiler are extremely strict and will not let you do integer equal string plus string. They will make you use a function to change the type. And that's something that you can do in WinDev too. You can do integer equal string to num of string 1 plus string to num of string 2, which has the advantage of being clear that is what you want to do. But as we are working in W language, and as this compiler is historically letting you do this kind of thing from the beginning, there was always this facility to change from one type to the other automatically. Well, we have to deal with it, and having the type in the variable is, in our case, a very good advantage. Then they are saying that in a modern integrated development environment, we'll display the variable type on demand and automatically flag operation which use incompatible types, making this notation with the prefix of the type in front largely obsolete. Well, I guess that we are not using a modern integrated development environment because, well, it will allow some incompatible type operation. It's a choice. So again, that's really thinking for some type of languages, and we are not in that case. That one also is not for us. What they are saying is that if you use a prefix on a variable name and then you change the type of the variable, let's say that you are using an integer on 4 bytes and then you change it to an integer on 8 bytes, well, in that case the prefix of the variable will either be false, or you are renaming it and then you can forget to rename it somewhere else. Well, in WinDev, if you are changing the type of the variable and you are using the charter to have the system automatically prefix a variable, then you won't have any of this problem, because, well, obviously you change the type, the prefix will be changed, and WinDev will tell you that it wants to rename all the variable for you. So all that is for clearly other environment than WinDev. Finally, they are saying that it is inconsistent with code portability, and the example that they are going is the standard WParam type that you have in Windows function declaration. When you are calling an API, you are sending a message, you have this WParam and LParam, which are two integer value. And yes, when you went from Windows 16-bit to Windows 32-bit, and even now Windows 64-bit, then the type of this variable changed, but not the name. So if you're using a naming convention with a type, now it's not an integer on 4, it's an integer on 8. Well, I don't know for you, but personally, if I'm changing my code to work from a 32-bit to a 64-bit environment, I really prefer to have a look at all the variables that were used before and see if all the functions are returning the same type of things and if everything is the same. I really want to check all that. So personally, I'm happy to have my variable called and declare as 32-bit, because at the end of it, I want to check them. So I don't think that that's something that is relevant for us also in the WinDev environment. It's not something that we're going to encounter. And then also they are saying that most of the time when you know how a variable is used, what it's used for, you know its type, and if you don't know what a variable is used for, knowing its type is not going to help you. Well, yes and no. If you know that it's a company name, obviously it's a string. But is it a string? Is it a zero terminated string? Is it a fixed length string? Or when it's an integer, is it an integer on 8 bytes, on 4 bytes, on 2 bytes? Well, yes, you know what a variable is for, but you don't know its type. You know the general type, but we have today in our modern language, we have many types that can fit a particular need. So knowing its type is really helpful for me. So as you can see, all that was about the inconvenience of having the prefix in front of the variable. After that, you have all the people saying that having a variable that is too long, variable name that is too long, makes the code unreadable. Well, it's kind of true. If instead of company name you have a company name in the case of a company who is only in the state of New York, and that's the name of your variable, well, clearly you're going to have trouble reading your code. But between that and C1, I really think that S company name is the kind of standard that you can use and that is reasonable, that will give you lots of information all the time and will allow you to code properly. The procedure naming convention is a subject where there is less controversy. It doesn't mean that all developers out there are naming their procedure or class methods the right way. It just means that it's kind of a consensus that it's a good idea to name your procedure in a way that tells you what they are doing. So basically it's verb followed by a modifier and eventually followed by something else in a Pascal case notation. So you have the first letter of each word uppercase and everything else lowercase. You can use underscore if you want to. You can use dashes if you want to. You can do all kind of things. Remember one thing, it's all about readability and being easy for you. I use that one. I find it very practical. But of course you can do whatever you like. The only thing again is find a standard that you like, use it and stick to it and be consistent. And when you are working on an old project where you didn't have standard, well, rename things. It's very easy in WinDev to rename all the calls to a procedure. You just change the name of the procedure and WinDev will propose to you to rename all the calls for you. So just do it. Each time you are going in a code, if it's not commented, comment it. If the variable is not named correctly, rename them. If the procedure themselves are not named correctly, rename them. Each time you're taking the time to do that, you are saving time for several hours of developing. So let's take an example. You remember perhaps in my printing class, I'm using things like print memo, get margins, and so on. So it tells you that this procedure is here to print memo. This one is going to get the margins. So without even looking at the procedure header, you already know basically what the thing is doing. Now bad examples that I've seen so many times that just thinking about it, well, bad examples, let's see, print, oh yeah, that's a good one. Print what? How? Does that print the whole page, a memo, a string, what? Just print. Memo, that's also very good. If you are working in a CL print class and you have a memo class. Does that mean that it's going to print the memo, that it's going to calculate the height of the memo on the... You have no idea. Only the guy who wrote the class or the procedure knows, and perhaps it did write it in the comments if you're lucky enough. Margin is a very good one too. Does that set the margin, or does that retrieve margin information, or anything else you can think of? So all that are example, real life example, things that I've seen and fight against, even in the teams I was leading, where there were people who just couldn't name their method and procedure correctly. If you are working in a team environment, one of the team must be the enforcer. One of you is the one integrated the code. One of you is the one checking everybody's code, checking also the variable name, checking also the procedure names. Clearly, it's not a job that is going to make you loved by everybody else. But if you don't enforce this kind of convention, it makes working in a team extremely hard. And even for you, remember again that when you are coding a program, you don't know for how long this program is going to be out there. I had software that I wrote that more than 15 years ago that is still used today, and from time to time I have somebody asking me to do a modification in it. And don't think that I knew all that when I started coding, that I fall in it when I was a kid. That's not true. I learned all that the hard way by making mistakes and doing the bad things and discovering that I was losing time. So when I have to do modification on an old program, a very old one, and I see how I was coding, it's really painful. And it takes me a lot of time just to do what I just told you. First, add comment if they're missing. That's generally not too much the case because I was already commenting when I started to work, and that's something that I did from the start. But even like that, I didn't comment as much as I do today. So I add comments, I change the variable, I add prefixes that I was not using at the beginning, and I rename procedure, and then suddenly the code becomes clear and I can do the modification that I have to do. So it's not too late. Even if you have a program that you've been working on for the last 3 years or 4 years and it's not using any convention, believe me, if you spend 2 or 3 days just doing that, renaming things, and commenting things, suddenly your program is going to be much easier to code, maintain, and all that. It's really an investment that is worth the time. Thank you.